All right, folks, it's been a minute since we've actually dove into the magical, mystical world of the magnetic mask. And I bet some of you've been jonesing, pacing around your room, staring at your Final Cut Pro timeline, asking yourself, when is Sean going to give us some more magnetic mask goodness? Well, my friends, the wait is over. Today, we're going full-on wizard mode with 5 insane effects that you may not have even known you could do with the magnetic mask. So grab your coffee, tighten your seatbelt, and let's make some magic. One really cool effect that you can do with the magnetic mask is to fake a rack focus. Now, rack focus is super useful if you're trying to draw the viewer's attention either to the foreground or to the background. A rack focus allows you to either focus on the foreground or focus on the background, depending on the context of what it is you want the viewer to be paying attention to. So let me show you how to fake a rack focus with the magnetic mask. So over here in Final Cut Pro, I have a bunch of different clips here that I'm going to use to actually show you all of these effects with the magnetic mask. Now, the first effect that we're going to do is faking a rack focus. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this clip right here and I'll just drag that down onto my timeline. And I can actually kind of zoom out a little bit on this. We're not going to use this whole clip, so let's just go ahead and cut this down. I think somewhere we'll go down to about like right here where she's talking for a minute and then he's talking. So I'm just going to kind of cut it right here. So I'll hold down the Option key and hit the left square bracket, and that will actually trim it back for me. And what I want to do is fake a rack focus. Now, if you're not familiar with a rack focus is when you have like 2 different subjects in the scene or 2 different items in the scene or something like that, and you want to draw the viewer's attention to either one or the other. That's often done with a rack focus where you focus in on the one subject or the one item, and then you can kind of change the focal length so that you focus in on the other. So you're kind of bouncing back and forth between the 2 subjects in the scene using a different focus. Now, there are definitely times like in this scene right here where we don't actually have the rack focus happening in camera. And so we can fake that using the magnetic mask. So the way I'm going to do this is, first of all, I'm going to just kind of look through this and decide where it's going to happen. From this point in the beginning all the way until maybe about right here, I think she's going to be in focus and he's going to be out of focus a little bit, okay? Now, to achieve that with the magnetic mask, it's actually going to be really easy to do. What we want to do is, first of all, we want to duplicate this clip right here. So we're going to hold down the Option key and drag that up above. And now we have a copy of this clip sitting on top of this one. And what we want to do is we want to mask out this subject here in the foreground. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to control the blur or the focus on that individual alone. So here on this clip right here, we're going to add a magnetic mask. So we'll do Control-Command-M, and that will add the magnetic mask for us. And then we're going to use the dropper tool here, and we will select our subject. Now, actually, I'm going to undo that really quick because I want to find a frame where a few different things are in view. I want to make sure that this light and this pole are in view and things like that, so I can kind of select and hide them and make sure that I'm only masking out the individual. And actually just let me kind of get like a kind of happy medium of the 2 here, because I want to also be able to see his arm here that goes back through here. So it's really just about finding the right frame, making sure that you have all of the elements that are visible that you're going to need to mask out so that you can tell the magnetic mask to do so. All right, so we've got on the frame I want, so I'm going to click on him, and then now I'm going to just find the different parts that are him. So this is his leg down here, this is his arm, his hand here, his arm there. Now I'm going to hold down Option and unselect that because I don't want that space in there. I don't want this. I do not want this lamp behind him, and I don't want that pole back here. I'm going to make sure I select just him. And then I don't want to select anything back here or anything back here or the paper, okay? And now I think we've basically got everything we need for him. So now I'll go ahead and analyze that. Okay, so now we've gone through and we've analyzed it. And we have a really good mask here of him. So now what we want to do is we want to kind of control the focus. So to do that, we're going to go over here to our effects panel, and we're just going to grab the Gaussian blur here, and we're going to drop that on him. And now you can see that looks really weird. So we're going to actually drop it on top of her clip as well. And now currently they're both completely out of focus, and that's okay because now we have control over which is going to be more in focus. The first thing I want to do is on her clip down here, I want to drop the focus out completely because she's going to be the first one in focus in the scene. Now, of course, you can see that this Gaussian blur that we have on this clip here is way too much, right? Because right now it just looks completely fake. But if we just take that amount and we drop it down, maybe a little bit lower down here, and I actually kind of figured out that the magic number in this case for this clip was 8. So if we drop that down to 8, now he is just out of focus enough that it looks kind of believable that she's rack focused in and he is kind of a little bit out of the depth of field, so he's a little out of focus. Now, the only other thing here with the mask that I want to fix is if you notice this, his hair right here, it's kind of a little bit too crisp of a line. So what I want to do is I want to feather that mask, and we'll feather it up to maybe about like 20, like this. And now you can see that it actually blends in with the surroundings around him a little better, and now it looks better. And now we have it set up so that she is the subject that's in focus in the beginning of the clip, and now he's a little bit out of focus. And then as we go on in the clip, we'll kind of move forward through here, and I think somewhere right about here, we're going to start to transition so that he becomes in focus and she goes out of focus, and that's where we're going to kind of fake the rack focus. And so what we'll do right at this frame right here, we're going to go up here, we're going to set a keyframe on the amount for him. And then we're also going to click on her frame and not change the frame that we're on. And we're going to add a keyframe for her as well. So that's going to be the starting point. And then if we just kind of slide along over here and maybe we move to about there, right before his hand starts to lift up right here, we're going to just swap those out. So over here, now we're going to change hers to 8. Remember that the magic number was 8 here. So now she's a little bit out of focus. And then if we click on his clip up here, we can set his clip back to 0. And now he is in focus and she's a little bit out of focus. And because we set the keyframe before, we had the starting keyframe back here where she was in focus right here. And then when it hits that keyframe and it starts to do the transition, she goes out of focus and he comes in focus. And now we have our rack focus. And all we had to do was add the magnetic mask to be able to kind of fake that rack focus. So if we just kind of watch it back really quick, you can see she is in focus in the beginning of the clip while they're starting to talk, and you can see she's talking. And then as it swaps over, he's in focus now, and she is completely out of focus. Again, that's just a super cool way to be able to draw the focus of the viewer to the foreground or the background or a specific object within the scene. This next effect is just super fun to do. With the magnetic mask, we can apply different effects to freeze frames. Okay, now back over here in Final Cut Pro, we're going to create a freeze frame effect using this clip of this boy running through the water here. And so we're going to drag that down onto our timeline here, and we'll kind of zoom in on that so we can get a better look at it. And basically what we want to do is as he kind of runs through here like this, I think somewhere around like there where his hair kind of goes up, but he's still in focus. So maybe like about there, that's where we want to create a freeze frame of him, okay? And to create a freeze frame, all you have to do is hold down Shift and hit H. And that's actually going to create a hold frame here that's going to just hold him in place for that entire duration of time, and then it'll jump back into him, okay? And now that we have the freeze frame in place, now we can use the magnetic mask to add a really cool effect to just the boy himself in the video in the freeze frame. So now what we're going to do, again, we're going to duplicate this clip. So we'll hold down the Option key, we'll drag it up here to the top. And it's really important to remember that you want to handle any of the timing stuff like the hold frame, or if you were going to speed it up or anything like that, you want to handle all of that first before you duplicate the clip. Because if you add a magnetic mask to a clip and then you change the timing of it, it's going to mess up the timing of the magnetic mask. So just remember, if there's any kind of a timing issue like this or a hold frame that you're adding into it, you want to make sure that you add all of those timing things in first and then duplicate the clip and then handle the magnetic mask. And now that we have that in place, let's go ahead and add a magnetic mask to this clip. So I'm going to hold down Control Command M, and that's going to add my magnetic mask in here. And then up here, we're just going to select the boy and we're going to create our mask. So we'll click on him. And then we're just going to kind of make sure that we get his arms, get his legs here. We want to make sure you get his feet. We want to also hold down the Option key and make sure we click in the space here so we don't actually get any space in there. And we'll just kind of do some clicking out here as well to make sure that we don't click anything but him. And again, we can analyze this clip. Okay, so now we have our magnetic mask analyzed, and it's basically created a mask all around him for the freeze frame as well, and then when he starts moving again. Okay, so let's add a really cool effect here. So what I want to do is I want to go over here to my effects, and I'm going to use the prism effect, and we're going to do something cool with this. So I'm going to just drag that onto my clip. So basically what I'm looking to do here is as it gets to here, when it gets to the freeze frame, I want the prism effect to basically do this. I want it to go way up, kind of spread way out like that, and then come back, and then he starts running again like that, okay? So to achieve that, what we want to do is go back to the beginning of the clip here. So we want to be on this clip right here, and we're going to start off with the prism amount being 0, okay? And the angle can stay the same. We're not going to change that really at all. We'll just leave everything as it is. And then what we want to do is set a keyframe there, okay? So that's going to be our starting point. And as we go through, we get over here to the freeze frame. Let's find the actual frame where the freeze frame starts. So it's right there. We are going to set a keyframe again. So here, it's going to start off being 0. And then somewhere around like the middle of the freeze frame, I want to actually kind of make this go way up. So we'll go like this, and we'll drag it way up and maybe have like the purple and the red go off to the side about that far like that. And that'll happen about halfway through. And so we've auto keyframed here. And now if we go back to the end, and I'm just going to use my keyboard to find the frame where he starts moving again. So we'll get the last frame of the freeze frame like that. And then here, we're going to go back down to 0 so that over the course of this freeze frame, it spans out, and then it comes back, and then he keeps running, okay? And let's just kind of take a look at the final version of that. And there you go. We have a really cool freeze frame effect that we were able to create with the magnetic mask. Now, the freeze frame effects are just limited to your imagination. There's a million different effects that you could do in the context of that freeze frame. So hopefully you take what I've shown you here and you expand with it and you create something even cooler with the freeze frame. Again, that's just a fun effect to do whenever you're creating a video and you have some sort of a freeze frame. It's fun to be able to just apply effects to the actual character or the subject that was in the freeze frame. This next effect is super cool. You can actually create a parallax effect using the magnetic mask. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, back over here in Final Cut Pro, let's create a really cool parallax effect using the magnetic mask. Now this one's gonna be a little bit more intricate, okay? So what we wanna do is we're gonna drag this clip right here of these mountains. I'm just gonna close my effects panel here. We have this clip of these mountains right here. Now in my eye, I see 3 different layers of these mountains. I'm seeing this dark layer here, that's this front kind of foreground layer. I'm seeing this middle layer right here, so this kind of mountain in the background, and then everything else behind it is going to be the background mountains, okay? And to create this parallax effect, what we're gonna do is we're going to just cut each of these different parts out of the scene using the magnetic mask, and then we're gonna be able to animate each one of them separately so we can get kind of a nice, cool parallax effect. So let me show you what I mean by that. Let me just kind of zoom back a little bit. And what we'll do is we'll create a couple of duplicates. We're going to create one duplicate of it and then another duplicate. So we have 3 layers here, okay? And the first layer here, the one that's on top, is going to be the foreground here, okay? And so in order to do that, I've got that one selected. I'm gonna hold down Control Option M, and that's gonna add a magnetic mask to this clip right here. And then I'm going to just select this black hill right here. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to use the Alt key to make sure that I do not select any of the ones behind it like that. And we don't want it to select anything out here. And we're just going to try to get really specific about just selecting this dark foreground hill right here. And I'll just throw another couple in here just to be safe. And I think that's probably good. Okay, so we'll analyze the magnetic mask on this clip right here so that we have a mask over the foreground. Okay, so that mask is analyzed. So now I can hit done on that one. And now we have our foreground hill masked out. So what we want to do is I'm just going to hide that for a minute. I'm going to hit the V key, and that's basically going to disable that clip. And what I want to do next for this middle layer, I want to select this hill here, okay? This whole section of mountains right here. That's going to be the next layer. So we'll make sure that we've clicked on that clip, and we'll do Control Command M to add our magnetic mask to this layer. And then over here, we're going to select that mountain there, this, make sure that we don't get these mountains out here, right? We don't want any of that. We also don't want any of this hill or this dark black mountain here. And we just want this as our layer. So I'm just going to kind of do a few more just to make sure I've got it really safely selected here. Okay, and that is my middle layer right there. And so I'm going to analyze that one. Okay, very awesome. So now we have a foreground and we have the middle layer here. And so what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to click on that and hit the V key, and that's going to disable that layer. And now we'll click on this final layer. And again, we'll add a magnetic mask, Control Command M. And now we're going to go ahead and select the background layer here. So we'll just select this. We don't want this mountain here, any of this stuff. We don't want this foreground stuff. We do want that, but not this. And we do want that, but not this. And again, it's just kind of, like we've done in the past, you're just using the magnetic mask to select the portions that are actually relevant to what you want to be masked out. And in this case, we're just making sure that we have everything selected for that background layer to be masked out. Okay, so I think I've got a pretty good mask there, so I'll analyze that one. Okay, and now what we have is 3 different layers of masks, okay? And so let me just kind of show you what each one looks like. So in this case, we have this layer. I'm going to hit Done. And since the other 2 are no longer visible right now, all you're seeing here is the mask of that background, okay? So that particular one is just the background. And then if I were to disable that one and enable this one, all I would have here, and I'm going to hit Done so it's there, all that's there is this right side, right? That's just this mountain over here. And then if I disable that one and I click on this one up here and enable that, that's just my foreground, okay? And you can see that we basically now have 3 layers sitting on top of each other that we can then manipulate now and add that kind of parallax effect. And a kind of interesting thing here is you can see that in the process of creating all 3 of those masks, I have like a little space here that didn't get hit. So what I'm going to do to just solve that problem is I'm going to create another clone of this down below, and I'm just going to remove the mask from that. And so basically what that's going to do is anything that's not in that little space right there is just going to be kind of hidden in that mask right there, okay? The original video will still be in the background, so if there are any gaps for any reason like that, then they'll just get filled with the original video. Now, check this out. We can actually make each one of these layers kind of move the way we want them to, okay? So the way that I'm going to handle this is I'm going to take each one of these layers and I'm going to make them their own compound clip. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to do some Ken Burns effects on each one of these different layers, and I don't want the effect to affect any of the layers below it. So I want to be able to manage each one of the Ken Burns effects in here, inside of each one of the clips. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Option key and hit G, and that's going to be the background clip. And then I'm going to click on this one, hold down the Option key, hit G, and that's going to be the middle. And then I will click on this one, hold down Option, hit G, that's going to be the foreground. Okay, and that's basically allowing me now to apply effects to each one of the layers without affecting the layers below it, okay? Now, let's go into this first one and let's apply an effect. Now, I'm going to use a plugin for this, and I've talked about these plugins before. I'm going to use one of the Final Cut Bros plugins, Pro Zooms, in here to handle the Pro Burn stuff, but you could achieve this same effect using just the built-in Ken Burns. If you just want to like click up here on your crop tools, you could go over to Ken Burns here and you could apply your Ken Burns effect to each one of these clips as you want. I just like the Pro Burns tools that come with Pro Zooms over here. It just kind of works better and it's a lot easier to work with for me. And of course, I'll put a link in the description down below. Dylan Bates was awesome enough to give us a 10% off discount coupon. So I'll add that coupon down there and you can get this plugin for 10% off if you want it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this Pro Burns plugin. I'm just going to drop it on top of this clip. And basically what's happening with this plugin is that over time, this foreground is kind of zooming in slowly like this, okay? And all you have to do to get that Ken Burns effect here is to drag the Pro Burns plugin onto here, and then you can use this to kind of manipulate how much it's zooming in and out. And so you can see if I scroll down toward the end of it, if I do this, I can see how much it's actually going to zoom in and out. So I think somewhere around there is going to be good for the final zoom, like that. Come down here so I can see it. I might go zoom in a little bit more like that, okay? And I think that's good like that. That's good for the foreground. So we can come back out of this compound clip now, and you can see right away that the foreground, this part right here, is zooming in over the other ones, right? Now you can see that it's kind of leaving a space here. So I think I'm actually going to go back into here and make sure that it zooms in and then it kind of moves up a little bit. So we'll go in here. And instead of it ending there, I'm going to have it kind of come up like this a little bit so that we can kind of, it zooms in, but it also kind of stays up like it should. So now we'll go back out here and yeah, so now it's zooming in like that and it's kind of blocking all of this other stuff. And we're going to move these two other layers around too. Okay, so the combination of all of them moving at different times is what's going to give us that kind of parallax effect. So let's go into this middle section here. So we'll double click to go into that one. And I'm going to grab this Pro Burns effect again. I'm going to drop it on here and I'm going to bring it over to this. And then somewhere around like toward the end here, I want to make sure that it's not too far in. And I want it to be kind of like that, right? So it's zoomed in, yeah, kind of like that right there. So that's pretty good. So let's go check that out. Let's look at the two together. You can see this one is zooming in, that one is zooming in, but they're kind of happening at different rates. And so it's adding that kind of cool parallax effect going on. Yeah, that's really cool. And then finally, let's go into this layer here and we're going to do the same exact thing. So we'll drop the Pro Burns effect onto here. And then let's go ahead and just do that. And I don't want that one to zoom in nearly that much. So I'm going to click on this. And I'm going to zoom out. And we really only want this one to just kind of zoom in mildly because the further back it goes, I think the slower the zoom should be and the less zoom it should be. But you could totally just kind of play with it and see what you get and what works best for you. But let's kind of step out of that now and let's look at all three of these together. It's really cool. You can see like this is kind of zooming at a different pace and this is, and you're getting that really, really cool parallax effect where all of the different layers are kind of happening at different rates. Isn't that just awesome? I just love how a parallax effect looks using the magnetic mask. Another super cool thing that you can do with the magnetic mask is selective color correction. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So over here in Final Cut Pro, let's look at how to selectively color correct using the magnetic mask. So I have this clip here of this woman who's doing a dance in front of this building. And so we're just going to kind of drag her onto the timeline here. And what we want to do is we want to build a mask that just masks her out and we can color correct just her. And then we're going to create a mask that will just mask out the background and not her. And then we can do color correction on that as well, which allows us to use different masks to color correct and manage the different parts of the scene. And so the first way we're going to do this is we'll go over here. We're going to figure out what effect we want. So I'm going to go into my effects panel here and I'm going to go down to color. And I think what I want is color wheels. So I'm just going to kind of drag this over. We'll go down to our color wheels here. And I want to find a frame that has her mostly like this, but it has some space so I can see the space in her arms here. And I'm going to take the color wheels effect and I'm going to drag it on top of her like that. And that's going to create a mask, but it's also going to make that mask part of the color wheels effect, okay? It's basically going to make the mask a child of the color wheels effect. Now let's go ahead and finish out the mask here. So we want to select her arm, we want to select her head, make sure it gets all of that and her hair. And then we'll select her arm over here and the coat. And then we'll kind of get the rest of her here. And then we're going to hold down the Option key because this actually right here is a space. So we want to click on that so we make sure that doesn't get selected. And then I think that basically covers most of her. So then we'll hold down the Option key and click out here so that the magnetic mask knows that none of this is her as well, like that. Okay, and I think we have a good mask here, so let's go ahead and analyze that. Okay, and now the benefit here of having applied the mask via the actual effect itself is that the mask is now only masking out that effect, okay? So what we can do is we can go up here to the actual color wheels and we can start to adjust the color wheels for this. So I'm going to actually click done so we can see the result here. And I'm going to up the saturation on the midtones here quite a bit like that because we want to kind of saturate her out, make her pop on the scene here. And then we're going to do the same thing with the shadows, just a little bit more like that. And I think the midtones over here, we're going to bring the darkness down so that'll actually add some contrast to her. And let's see, I'll just kind of bring the highlights up a little bit too. I might be a little too high on the midtones there. We'll bring the shadows up like that. Yep. Bring the highlights down just a tiny bit, and then we'll bring the shadows down because, again, we're just trying to add some contrast to her. So we've kind of brightened her up a little bit. Let's take the midtones and maybe play around here and see if any of these directions are more interesting. Let's just kind of play around with saturation, make it a little more colorful here. And let's go up here. Let's see, bring the temperature up so she's kind of like warmed up a little bit. And basically what I'm doing is I'm like adding a lot of saturation and color and kind of making her pop way more in the scene, right? And so now she is very vibrant, very kind of colorful, and we can see her very well like that, right? And that's exactly what we want. So now we've kind of color corrected her to be much more vibrant in the scene. And now what we could do is we can actually use another mask on this clip that's just going to select the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and just click on my properties so you can see that when I do this, it's going to add another mask. And I'm going to go over here to color wheels again, and I'm actually going to select the background. Okay, and this is going to be a completely different mask. You can see that it added another mask over here. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to select all of these different parts like this, but I don't want her this time, right? So we're going to make sure that we do this so that she is not selected anymore, like that. Okay. And I'm just going to kind of select out here like this. So now what we have is essentially an inverted part of the mask, right? It's inverted to her. Although you can see it's not letting me actually select them up here. So I'm going to just undo some of these points here really quick, because sometimes if you do too many, it doesn't actually work really well. So, okay, so we've got that. It's selecting the whole background. And then now I will use some of these to just select, make sure that it's not selecting her. Okay, so now we have a mask that is the entire background here. And this is going to allow us to color correct the background in contrast to her so that we're not actually adding any color to her. Now we're going to change the color of the background. And what we can do is we can go ahead and click Analyze and analyze this mask. Okay, and now we have two different masks here. And in this second mask, we can go over here. We'll click Done so that it's just handling the background here. And we can actually just go up and kind of globally desaturate the background a little bit like this. We could go all the way down to black and white, but I don't think I want to do that. I think I want to kind of just be a little bit more dull in here just so that it isn't, that she kind of pops even more. And that just kind of gives you a basic idea of how you could do this. Of course, you can go in and get way more detailed than this. You could go in and you could color correct different plants in a room, or you could color correct different people, different elements. You can do this with as many masks as you want. Obviously, if you were to just pile mask on top of mask, it would probably start to affect performance, but it's really cool that you can just selectively color correct different parts of the scene using different masks. And we can see now in this final result of her that basically she is dancing through the scene. She is much more vibrant, way more colorful. The background is much more dull and not as obvious. And it's actually really kind of making her stand out and pop in the scene. Using the magnetic mask, you can do color correction or color grading on different elements within the scene to add that little flair or to add a little emphasis or whatever it is that you want to add to the scene. You can do that by color correcting different elements within the scene. Now, this next effect is super cool. Now, my words are not going to be able to describe very well what this effect is, so let's take a look at the effect now. I like to refer to that effect as the magnetic mask color leak. So let's dive into Final Cut Pro and I will show you how to do it. Okay, back over here in Final Cut Pro, let's create this magnetic mask color leak effect. So I have this clip of this woman here raising her hand. She's kind of looking out, and we want to add this color leak effect so that it basically looks like she kind of draws the energy from the universe and it all kind of like starts to pour out of her, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this clip, add it to our scene over here, and now we're going to want to create some duplicates of this. So this essentially is our background plate, just this lower one right here. Then we're going to want to make a duplicate of this and pull it up above, and we're going to want to mask her so that we can add the effect to her. So we'll go in here, we'll click on that. Control Command M is going to add the magnetic mask for us. And then make sure we click on our properties up here, and now we can actually mask her out. Let me find a good frame where I can kind of see all of her hand like that. All right, so we're going to click on her. We're going to mask her hands, and we'll just kind of click around and get a good mask, a good solid mask. And then we'll hold down Option, and then we'll click out here to kind of negate the spaces that we don't want to be the mask, like that. Okay, and that'll give us a good mask for her. So let's go ahead and analyze that. Okay, so now we have this mask here that is just her. And if we hit done, it's just going to be her on here. Now, what I want to do is I want to adjust a couple of things to make this effect work. So first, we want to go up here and we want to add a color wheel. So we'll go up to our color wheels, and we'll add the color wheel, and I'm going to make some adjustments here. Now, you could go through and you could kind of play around with these manually, like adjust the different, saturations and colors and all that stuff, and you could get the effects you want. I actually have the numbers that I want because I kind of did this before. So I'm just going to put the numbers in so you can see what the effect I got, but you can, of course, play around with these numbers. So what we're going to do is over here in Global, we're going to go down here, and we're going to set the saturation on this one to 1.76. So I'm just going to click in there, 1.76 on the global saturation. So that's going to make her much brighter. And if you go up here, you can see that what that was is I would have slid the actual saturation slider up to here, okay? And then down here in shadows, I'm going to set the saturation here to 1.47. And that's going to make it even brighter, more saturated, more kind of glowing and orange. Now, I'm not going to change the actual RGB values here at all, so I'm not changing the color. And the same was true for the global, okay? Global and shadows, we're not adjusting the color at all. And then if we go down here to midtones, I'm going to actually adjust the color a little bit. So the red, I'm going to make that 11. And then the blue over here, I'm going to make that 17. So it's kind of adding a little bit more color and changing the hue of it a little bit. And then saturation, I'm going to set this one to be 1.92, like that. So now we're getting kind of really bright, really glowing, really saturated, okay? And then finally, if we go down here to highlights, I'm going to show that one. Now down here, I'm going to set the red here to 11 also. I'm going to set the blue to 7. And then I'm going to go down here to saturation, and I'm going to set the saturation to 1.7. And what this has now done, it has now taken my character and it's added this kind of like red hot, fiery, kind of glowing orange to her, right? And basically, you can achieve the same thing just by manipulating these up here and moving them around the way you want to. But since I had already done that and I knew what the final numbers were going to be, I just put them in down below. But for you, when you do this, if you just want to dive in and start to kind of play around with the different values here, you can get a different look and feel for the actual color of your character. Now, the next step of this is we want to add a Gaussian blur to this. So if we go over here to our effects and then we go to blurs, we're going to add a Gaussian blur to this right here, okay? And that's going to kind of add that glowing effect to her. And then if we go over here, we can adjust a couple of these things. We could adjust the amount here if we want to, and we could adjust the blur boost, which would kind of make it span out a little bit like that. Now, in order for this final effect to come together, what we need to do is we need to make another duplicate of this clip, and we need to put that on top of this glow so that she is there and all of this glowing and color change is happening behind her, okay? So to achieve that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Option. I'm going to create another duplicate of this, and I'm going to keep the magnetic mask on there because I want it to just be her. But for the color wheels, I'm going to get rid of them, and the Gaussian blur, I'm going to get rid of that. And now what we have is the original cutout version of her in front, right? That's what we're seeing here. And then behind her, we now have the actual glow and the color effects going on, okay? And that is very, very cool. So let's go ahead and animate this and we'll add kind of a little bit more to the effect here. So right at the beginning, I want to set everything to 0. So the Gaussian blur is going to be set to 0. The color wheels can stay as they are. And so we're going to just kind of hit a keyframe on the amount of the Gaussian blur and we'll hit a keyframe on the blur boost. And then as we get over to about here, I think, that's where I want things to kind of start to grow, like the colors to grow, the glow to grow, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to hit another keyframe there. And then right about there, I'm going to have the glow start to kind of come out like this, maybe to about there. And I'm also going to have the color boost do that a little bit like that. Okay, so now we're like here, it's growing. She puts her hands up, she gets to about there. And then over here, maybe like somewhere around there, I want it all to kind of have grown even bigger and have the color boost grow way out to about like that, right? So now it'll look like this. And so adding in this kind of animation, we kind of get this effect where it looks like she puts her hands up and then the glow starts to happen. And then boom, it all kind of just glows across the valley. And then if we just kind of watch the whole thing, she raises her arms, she brings the energy out, and then it just kind of glows across the entire valley. And we have a really cool effect that we created with the magnetic mask. And there you are, my friends. 5 really awesome effects that you may not have even known that you could do with the magnetic mask and Final Cut Pro. Which of those effects was your favorite? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoy this content, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button. I'm really trying to get the channel to about 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. The more subscribers we get, the more this channel grows, the more it gets put out to more people in the world, and we can have bigger conversations, larger conversations about video editing, Final Cut Pro, Apple Motion, all of the different things that we love to talk about here. As always, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you. I hope you have a great day, happy editing, and I will see you in the next video. A rack focus allows you to kind of focus on the foreground and then focus. There you are, my friends. 5 really awesome effects that you may not have even known that you could do with the magnetic mask.